He dialed 911 while watching his grandfather's Hamilton vanish into a stranger's fist. A flash of police light, he thought, would jolt his son back to living. Yet the cuffs closed on him instead, and Jake's eyes sank into the pavement. Every night since, Jack replays the call. Was it rescue or betrayal? The silence in the Lawson house was not born the day Susan died. It only finished the job. For months before the cancer carved her down to shadows, the conversations at dinner had already grown brittle, the laughter arriving late, breaking apart like cheap glass under a heel. After the funeral, the quiet simply locked every door and hung its coat on the hook where her quilted jacket used to be. John, everyone called him Jack on the line at Syracuse Motors, rose at 5:10 a.m., out of habit, not desire. He padded across the kitchen linoleum, coffee maker burbling like an aging uncle trying to clear his throat, and stared at the fridge door. The photo of Jake at 12, cheeks smeared with birthday cake, clung there with a magnet shaped like the New York Yankees logo. That boy had dreamed of Columbia, of law school, of buying his mom a lake cottage. The man who now slept in the basement behind a sagging futon wanted nothing but the next oblivion. Jack tucked a thermos into his lunch pail, then paused at the top of the basement stairs. Even through the closed door, he could feel the separate climate down there. Stale air, faint chemical sweetness, the low bass of a video game menu looping through the night. He used to shout, "Breakfast!" Now he just listened to the wall clock tick, hoping to hear creaking steps that never came. Outside, dawn smeared peach light over rows of salt-stained sedans in the driveway. Jack's pickup started with a cough. He drove to the plant, where the press machines at least spoke a language he understood. Belts whining, pistons clanging, metal begging to be kept in line. By 3:30 he clocked out, overtime approved, hands smelling of coolant and steel. Provision, endurance, no complaints. The creed hammered into him by a father who'd survived Normandy and never again trusted words. But provision did not mend the fault lines at home. That afternoon, Jack stood in the living room doorway and felt something was off in the air, like a room that has been trespassed. His gaze slid to the mantel. Empty. The Hamilton watch, gold-plated Art Deco numerals, gone. He had polished it every Memorial Day, told Jake the story, until the boy could recite it backward. 30 years at the mill, a timepiece for a lifetime of time surrendered. Jack's breath shuddered. He checked the usual hiding spots. The junk drawer, the cigar box Susan once used for coupons, even the sock basket she never had the heart to throw out. Nothing. The house seemed to hold its breath with him. Finally, he steeled himself, descended the basement stairs. Jake lay half-sprawled on the futon, headphones on, blue monitor glow painting his gaunt cheeks. Empty beer cans formed a metallic skyline beside the mattress. Jack's voice scraped out. "Jake?" No response. He stepped closer, nudging the sole of Jake's sneaker with his boot. The young man jerked awake, eyes frantic, then dull. He tugged off the headphones. "What?" "The watch." "Your great-grandfather's? Where is it?" Jake blinked slowly, a strobe light of accusation flickering behind half-lidded eyes. "How should I know?" Jack's hands balled, grease still under the nails. "Don't lie to me." A shrug, dismissive as ash. "Maybe you lost it." Something inside Jack chilled to iron. He turned without another word, climbed the stairs, and fetched his jacket. On the dining room table lay an overdue notice for the internet bill Susan used to handle. Under it, a pawnshop flyer Jake had dropped weeks ago, listing top dollar for gold timepieces, an address in the Southside Warehouse District. Jack shoved the flyer into his pocket, stepped into the evening drizzle, and followed the thread of dread unspooling in his gut. The south side of Syracuse always smelled of wet brick and regret. Dilapidated warehouses squatted beneath freeway overpasses, their busted windows patched with cardboard like blind eyes bandaged too late. Jack parked 2 blocks shy of the pawn shop, engine ticking in the cool April mist. Neon flickered above the door. Cash, 4, gold. He saw Jake before Jake saw him, leaning against a graffiti-tagged wall, hoodie pulled low, one hand clutching a small velvet pouch. A lanky man in a shiny puffer jacket approached, flanked by another kid with darting eyes. Words passed too quiet for the rain to carry. Then, Jake opened the pouch. Even from 30 feet, the glint of gold cut through dusk like a flare gun. Jack's heart punched his ribcage. His legs moved of their own accord, but halfway there he stopped. The scene unfolded slower than a nightmare. The dealer inspected the watch, nodded, slipped a folded wad into Jake's palm. Jake's shoulders sagged. Relief? Shame? Exhilaration? Jack would never know. He fumbled for his phone, fingers numb. 911 connected. He muttered details, eyes locked on his son's profile. A primitive hope shoved through his chest. Maybe blue lights and cold cuffs would jolt the boy awake where love and lectures had failed. Sirens rounded the corner, strobing red over rain-slick asphalt. The dealer and his lookout froze. Jake's head snapped up, eyes huge. Jack stepped forward, hands raised, ready to explain. But the dealer was already shouting, "That's him!" Old man tried to fence it. We said no. Chaos blossomed. 2 officers grabbed Jack first, twisting his arms behind him. "You have the right to remain silent." The Miranda litany blurred as rainwater streamed off the brim of one cop's hat. Jack sputtered protests, but his words drowned in the dealer's rehearsed outrage. Jake stood 10 feet away, mouth working like a fish gasping on shore. One officer questioned him. Jack strained to hear. Jake's jaw clenched. And then, silence. He looked at his sneakers, at the money crumpled in his fist, at the watch now bagged as evidence. He said nothing. Handcuffed, Jack was shoved into the cruiser. Through the smeared window, he watched his son bathed in police strobes, a living ghost fading behind curtains of rain. The precinct smelled of burnt coffee, bleach, and stories that never got fixed. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, mirroring the static in Jack's skull. An officer guided him to a hard plastic chair in an interview room the size of a pantry. His wrists ached where metal kissed bone. Across the table, Detective Marquez, late 40s, salt and pepper stubble, eyes rimmed red from shift 18 perhaps, clicked a pen. "Mr. Lawson, help me help you. Why were you in that alley?" Jack stared at his calloused palms, the lines etched like abandoned train tracks. He tried to speak, but the words clogged in his throat. Finally, a whisper. "My son." Marquez sighed, glanced through the two-way mirror. Voices muffled beyond. Booking, phones ringing, a drunk singing off-key. "Your son says nothing. Dealer claims you're the seller." "He lied," Jack croaked. "The watch is mine. Was mine." His shoulders collapsed, the old stoicism leaking out like coolant from a cracked line. "I thought if cops showed up," his voice broke, "he'd finally see where the road ends." Marquez's gaze softened a fraction. "Sometimes they gotta crash themselves." Jack swallowed a sob. It tasted like metal. "He's not bad. Just lost." The door opened. Another officer entered with Jake, uncuffed but flanked. The boy looked smaller under harsh light, cheeks blotchy from cold and shock. For the first time in years, father and son locked eyes without anger as buffer. In Jake's pupils swirled panic, guilt, a little boy peering out from behind grown man wreckage. Marquez cleared his throat. "Jake Lawson, you willing to make a statement?" Jake's lips trembled. He glanced at Jack, who could only nod once, slow. The nod said, "Tell the truth. I'm still your dad." Jake inhaled, voice rasping. "The watch. I stole it. He was trying to stop me. He wasn't selling anything. I lied." Tears cut clean tracks down grime-streaked skin. "Please don't charge him." Silence settled heavy. Marquez exhaled through his nose, then signaled the uniform to escort Jake out. "We'll talk," he said. When the door shut, he unlocked Jack's cuffs. Metal clattered onto the table. "Take a seat in the lobby, Mr. Lawson. Paperwork's ugly, but I don't see you spending the night." Hours later, dawn blued the windows. Jack stepped onto cracked concrete steps, the air smelling of thawing earth and diesel. In his pocket, inside a clear evidence pouch, lay the Hamilton watch, cold, heavier than he remembered. Jake remained inside, fingerprints inked, charges pending. The sky above the city flickered from slate to pale gold, as if someone were slowly raising a dimmer switch. Jack tightened his coat against the chill and started the long walk home. The cuff bruises throbbed in time with his heartbeat. But through the ache, one defiant thought glimmered. Our war is over. Not because anyone had won, but because both soldiers finally saw the casualties. Healing would be slow, maybe unfinished. He would wait, though, as long as it took. Watch in hand, door unboarded, silence, ready to be broken. Jack Lawson's boots left faint semicircles in the film of rainwater that glossed the precinct steps, each print a small crescent of fatigue. Dawn had softened the hard edges of Syracuse's warehouses into pastel silhouettes, but his shoulders still felt yesterday's iron. He held the Hamilton watch inside his clenched fist like a talisman so cold it might brand his skin. The officer at the desk returned his emptied wallet, his phone, and a form stamped, "Released without charge." Jack mumbled thanks, as though courtesy mattered at 5:38 a.m., when your son was in the county lockup. Inside the lobby's stale warmth, fluorescent bulbs hummed above a cracked vinyl couch. Jack sank onto it, exhaustion pouring through seams the handcuffs had opened. He tried to roll stiffness from his shoulders, but instead he pictured Jake in some holding cell, hoodie traded for an orange jumpsuit that smelled of bleach and other men's sweat. Anger surfaced, then drained, leaving guilt like sediment. A door beside the reception desk clicked open. Out stepped a woman barely past 30, blazer rumpled, mascara smudged by a sleepless night. She balanced a to-go cup of coffee and a bulging canvas tote. A badge clipped to her lapel read, "Emily Cruz, Public Defender's Office." She scanned the room, eyes pausing on him. "Mr. Lawson?" Her voice carried the cautious tone of someone who'd delivered too many bad diagnoses. Jack rose, watch hand slipping into his pocket. "Yeah, they said I've been assigned to your son's arraignment." She gestured toward a bench by the vending machines. "Got a few minutes to talk?" She spoke quickly, as though hustling words down an assembly line. He followed, easing onto the edge of the bench. The vending machine's fluorescent tongue illuminated dust motes between them. Cruz cracked the plastic lid of her coffee but didn't drink. Jake Lawson, charged with third-degree grand larceny and possession of stolen property. Bail recommendation likely 15 to 20,000. Prosecutors pushy. They've got pawn shop footage, dealers' statements. Jack's lungs tightened. "But the watch is mine. I didn't press charges." "That helps, but theft from a parent is still theft. And there's the dealer's story that you were fencing. We can undermine that. But Jake's silence last night complicates things." She rifled her tote, extracted a stack of pre-filled forms. "Judge Hammond's presiding. Conservative on substance cases." The fluorescent hum thickened. Jack rubbed his temple. "Substance?" Cruz softened. "Dealer says your son tried to trade for oxy. That nudges the narrative toward addiction." She drew a slow breath. "Look, Mr. Lawson, my job is to get him options beyond jail. We can argue for supervised rehab. But I need Jake to accept some responsibility." Jack remembered the vacant eyes, the trembling hands cupped around pawnshop cash. The boy who once diagrammed constitutional amendments on his bedroom wall was drowning. "He'll listen," Jack whispered, not sure if it was true. "Visiting hours begin after arraignment," Cruz said, packing her tote. "Try to reach him then. Meanwhile, go home. You're shaking." "I'm fine." "You're bleeding." She nodded at his wrist, raw red circles where cuffs had pinched. He hadn't felt the sting until that moment. Cruz scribbled her cell number on a card. "Call if anything surfaces. Medical history, prior counseling, letters from employers. Character references matter." She stood, hesitated. "Addiction cases, family's the hinge." "Don't underestimate what you mean." The lobby door whooshed behind her, leaving Jack in recycled air that smelled faintly of tired coffee. He opened his fist. The Hamilton's crystal winked back, ticking steady, indifferent. He closed his eyes and envisioned Susan's last hours, her breath rattling like loose bolts. He'd promised her he'd keep their son safe. Provision, endurance, no complaints. The creed suddenly tasted like rust. He rose, pushing legs toward the exit. Outside, the drizzle had thinned to silver mist. He started the pickup, heater protesting. Halfway home, he missed the interstate exit and found himself on a frontage road skirting Onondaga Lake, water blank as unruled paper. He pulled over, shut off the engine, and lay his forehead on the steering wheel. Minutes, or maybe lifetimes, passed before he exhaled and reached into the glove compartment for the battered copy of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance Susan once gave him. A bookmark at page 89 held her scribble. Fixing things is love in motion. Jack felt a sob shudder but didn't let it out. Instead, he flipped the book shut, returned it, and drove home with the watch ticking like a metronome of unfinished vows. At the house, the living room smelled of damp shoes. He placed the watch on the mantel where the dust circle still marked its absence. The clock above the television showed 7:12 a.m. He needed a shower, a change of clothes, a plan. But first he opened Susan's sewing cabinet. Under neat rows of thread spools lay a small wooden box containing old letters, life insurance notices, Jake's acceptance packet, condolence cards. Beneath them, an envelope addressed in Susan's looping hand. For Jake, when he's ready. Jack held it to his chest. The sealed flap tugged like a stitch ready to pop. He slipped it into his jacket pocket instead and headed for the shower. Steam filled the bathroom, fogging the mirror until his reflection disappeared. Jake Lawson stared at the cinder block wall opposite his bunk, counting the paint chips shaped like continents. In one he saw Africa, in another Australia racked by lightning cracks. County lockup smelled of antiseptic and unresolved co-pain, cheap soap, stale coffee from the guard station, sweat rank fear. 2 bunks, 1 toilet, a sliver window caged by dirty wire. His cellmate, a middle-aged shoplifter named Mooney, muttered in his sleep, relit cigarettes that existed only in dream memory. Jake's hoodie had been swapped for an orange jumpsuit, stiff at the collar, too long in the sleeves. The cotton scraped his neck every time he swallowed, punishment for breathing. His mouth tasted of copper. Hours earlier, he'd bitten the inside of his cheek to keep from crying as they snapped his picture. The flash burned behind his eyelids still. He replayed the alley like a movie with no pause button. The watch, glinting gold under neon. His dad's voice, deeper than he remembered, calling his name. The sirens. The moment the cop grabbed his father, not him. Jake's heart had punched once, hard. Do something. But shame had stapled his tongue. He saw again Dad's face against the wet pavement. Confusion, betrayal, love. Only in interrogation did words claw out. Too late? But maybe not. He wasn't sure. A metallic clank jolted him. Breakfast cart. Paper cup of oatmeal slid through the slot. Mooney snored on. Jake forced a spoonful down. Cardboard mush, because hunger meant you were still alive. Somewhere beyond walls, Susan's memory flickered. Her laugh when he first rode a bike. Her cough behind a bedroom door. He pressed fists to temples, willing her back. Only the cell's buzz answered. Late morning, a guard summoned him to a cinder block interview room. Emily Cruz waited, legal pad tattooed with ampersands and arrows. Her gaze, though tired, was not unkind. Your arraignment's set for 2 p.m., she began. I can motion for a 90-day inpatient rehab in lieu of bail, but the ADA will resist unless you show willingness. Jake's tongue felt like burlap. I said the truth. It helps. But they'll want proof of addiction issues and a treatment plan. She slid a form across. You'll sign commitment to evaluation? He nodded, pen trembling. After signatures, Cruz pulled a sealed envelope from her folder. Your father asked me to give you this. Said it's from your mom. Jake's breath stalled. He took the envelope. The handwriting snagged his heart. Loopy, teacher neat. The paper smelled faintly of lavender drawer sachets. He waited until Cruz left, then slid it open. Sweet boy, it began. If you're reading this, I'm probably gone, and something must feel very wrong. Remember, wrong can be a doorway. Open it. Her words flowed like warm water over a wound. Stories of his first step. Confessions of her own college dreams deferred when bills piled up. A reminder that love is never measured by diplomas. When your father is silent, it's not because he doesn't feel. It's because feeling scares him speechless. Knock louder. He'll find the words. She ended with a quote. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in Leonard Cohen, her favorite. Tears blurred the page. He wiped his nose, folded the letter, and tucked it under his mattress like a seed needing dark to germinate. That afternoon, Jack sat in a church basement smelling of coffee and floor wax, fluorescent lights echoing precinct deja vu. A battered sign read, Parents of Opioid Survivors, Support Circle. Folding chairs formed a ring. 10 people sat like satellites, eyes orbiting coffee cups. Jack almost fled, but a gray-haired woman touched his sleeve. First time? Her voice carried the hush of someone who'd shouted herself hoarse years ago. He nodded. My son's in jail. Took my dad's watch. She gestured to an empty chair. Welcome. I'm Nora. My boy's on month 11 of recovery. She offered a card, a slim chrysalis printed above a phone number. You don't have to fix him, but you get to heal too. Jack lowered himself onto the chair. Around the circle, voices unfurled. A retired firefighter whose daughter overdosed twice. A librarian who learned to lock her purse. A school janitor who relapsed into guilt each time his son stole. Jack listened, knuckles white on his knees. When it was his turn, words came halting, then torrential. He spoke of Susan's death, of the silent basement, of the watch shining like a lighthouse too late. Tears slipped free. Nobody flinched. After the meeting, Nora handed him a pamphlet on crafting boundaries. A wrench for hearts, she joked. Her laugh reminded him of Susan's at the Little League bleachers. He pressed the pamphlet to his chest. Outside, clouds parted for a shaft of sunlight so bright he had to squint, a crack for the light to get in. Judge Hammond's courtroom rose 2 stories, wood-paneled, smelling of varnish and old grievances. Ornate windows let in hard spring light that fell in diagonal blades across defendant tables. Jack sat behind the bar, palms sweating despite cool air. Emily Cruz whispered last-minute strategy beside Jake, who stood in shackles, eyes red but clear. The ADA, a brisk man with a tie too tight, argued larceny's seriousness, the need for deterrence. Family victims deserve justice, Your Honor. Cruz countered. First offense, demonstrated remorse, father's non-prosecution wish, addiction indicators, a bed reserved at Cayuga Creek Recovery. She cited state diversion precedent. Jack's heartbeat hammered with each objection sustained, overruled. Judge Hammond, face carved from Midwest granite, laced thick fingers. Mr. Lawson, he addressed Jake, voice resonant. Do you recognize the weight of what you did? Jake swallowed, chains clinking. Yes, Your Honor. I'm told you seek treatment. Speak plainly. Why now? Jake's gaze flicked to his father. Jack thought he saw that 12-year-old boy again, frosting on his cheeks. Jake drew a breath. His answer trembled, but did not break. Because I finally heard someone knock louder than my silence, sir. A hush rippled. Hammond considered, gavel poised like thunder withheld. Conditional release to Cayuga Creek, 90 days inpatient, random testing, nightly curfew post-program. Violate once. You serve the maximum gavel struck. Chains came off. Jack exhaled a prayer he didn't know he still believed. Bailiffs escorted Jake to processing. Cruz winked subtle reassurance and followed. Visiting room B smelled of Lysol and stale hope. Plexiglass separated father and son. A phone receiver crackled between them. Jake held it first. Dad. Jack lifted his voice gravel. I read Mom's letter through you. He tapped his chest. Feels like she grew me a new tongue. Jake's laugh broke, half sob. I'm scared. Me too. Jack's eyes shimmered. We'll be scared together. You go where you need. I'll be here, building doors instead of walls. Jake wiped his cuffed wrist across his eyes. I'll knock, he whispered. Jack pressed his palm to the glass. Jake mirrored it. For a moment, the plexiglass seemed to soften, 2 hands nearly touching. After farewell, Jack drove to Oakwood Cemetery. Susan's headstone gleamed under weak sunlight. He knelt, placing the Hamilton watch atop the marble for a heartbeat, then slipped it back into his pocket. He's not lost, Sue, he said. He's learning directions. Wind rustled budding maples carrying distant church bells. Jack rose, spine aching, but lighter. At home, he taped a note to the basement door. Fresh start upstairs whenever you're ready. Then, he left the door ajar, just enough for light to spill down into the shadows. Jake Lawson's first week at Cayuga Creek smelled like bleach, pine disinfectant, and the metallic tang of anticipation. The rehab sat on a wooded bluff 30 miles north of Syracuse, an old convent converted into a treatment facility whose brick walls still remembered hymns and silent vows. Now the halls echoed with different confessions, the click of plastic med cups on a rolling cart, the distant sob of someone finding out what their body felt like when it had to speak without narcotics, the nervous laugh of newcomers trying to prove. They weren't terrified. On intake day, they'd stripped Jake of everything but uncertainty. Shoelaces, phone, a frayed photo of his mother he'd carried in his wallet for years. The nurse sealed his hoodie drawstring in a clear pouch labeled Return on Discharge as though it were evidence. In place of his clothes, he received gray sweats, a pair of state-issue sneakers, and a cup of tepid broth in the cafeteria that made him think of college ramen. Long nights pretending to write papers while quietly unraveling. Days followed a rigid spine of schedule. 6:30 wake-up, vitals, group therapy, occupational tasks in the greenhouse. Pulling weeds was less about gardening than about feeling dirt hug your fingerprints again. One-on-one counseling, then reflection hour, where silence roamed the corridors with curious pause. Jake hated reflection hour. His own thoughts sounded like a construction site abandoned mid-demolition. But by day 5, something shifted. He realized nothing catastrophic happened when he sat in a chair and listened to the rain tick on a high window. The world did not collapse just because he was awake for it. Detox had already drained the worst jagged edge of withdrawal before he got here, but tremors still visited his hands like unscheduled guests. Each time, a nurse named Rosa pressed an ice cube between his palms. "Feel the melt," she'd whisper. "It means your body is warming back to life." Jake wanted to ask Rosa if she had children. She radiated the stern gentleness of someone who'd learned to love without illusions. But the question stuck behind his teeth, still shy of the new rule. Honesty hurt, but secrets suffocated. Sunday visitation arrived as both dread and anchor. Jack Lawson pulled his dented pickup into the gravel lot at noon, the truck bed now carrying a toolbox, 2 folding chairs, and an old catcher's mitt he'd found upstairs while cleaning. He'd nearly tossed the mitt in a donation bag before recognizing his own faded marker initials inside the pocket. JL85. He oiled the cracked leather Saturday night until it smelled of childhood summers, the aroma of dirt, sweat, and pine tar he once dreamed would carry his life farther than a factory floor. Visitors waited in a sunlit room that had once been the convent chapel. Stained glass saints now cast fractured rainbows over plastic chairs. A table offered weak coffee and volunteer-baked banana bread. Jack clutched the mitt like an admission ticket. When Jake shuffled in with a counselor escort, their eyes met, but didn't lock. Jake's frame looked both leaner and sturdier, as if something poisonous had been drained and replaced with caution. They sat under the fractured light, the mitt resting between them. Conversation lurched, then moved. Jack spoke of overtime shifts he'd taken so he could afford whatever insurance wouldn't cover. Jake described the greenhouse, admitting he'd been surprised to care if seedlings lived. Each pause felt like stepping onto a swinging rope bridge. Both men tested weight, listening for snap. Yet, the bridge held. Jack slid a small spiral notebook across the table. Wrote down some stories, for when words vanish out of my head. His voice cracked the way dry soil does when it finally rains. Jake thumbed the first page. In Jack's block handwriting, a title. When You Were 5 and the Fireflies Arrived. He swallowed. Thanks, Dad. Visitation ended too soon, but something unspoken lingered, a thread tossed over the walls. Back in his dorm-style room, Jake opened the notebook again. Story 1 described a July night lit by winking sparks and Susan's laugh floating above lawn chair creaks. Jake read until lights out, each memory a lantern against the dark. He didn't cry, but he didn't need pills to fall asleep. The quiet blanketing his bunk was heavy, yet breathable, like the first deep snow of the season. You feared it, but you also knew it meant the world wasn't done changing forms. Jack's Monday began with the clang of plant floor alarms and ended in a church basement that smelled of damp hymnals and cheap instant coffee. His new normal. The parents of opioid survivors group had grown. Folding chairs multiplied like rabbits. Tonight's theme, scrawled on a whiteboard, was detaching with love. Jack tried to parse the phrase. How do you stand far enough to let them fall, but near enough to catch them before they break? Nora, the gray-haired mother who had welcomed him his first night, shared how her son relapsed after a year clean because she kept a rescue cushion under every risk, paid parking tickets, lied to employers, hid how hard she cried. Love isn't a wire transfer, she said, fingers twisting a tissue. It's a mirror and a gate. Jack clung to the sentence. When his turn came, he cleared his throat. Jake's in Cayuga Creek. Says greenhouse dirt in his nails makes him feel real. He paused, cheeks warming. I'm learning to feel real, too. He unfolded the pamphlet Nora had given him. Setting boundaries without guilt. The group nodded like trees in the same wind. After the meeting, a volunteer named Bernard asked if Jack could look at the building's broken furnace. Habit kicked in. 30 minutes later, Jack had replaced a corroded thermocouple, the burner flame blooming steady blue. Bernard offered pay. Jack waved it off. But on his drive home, he realized the moment he picked up a wrench for strangers, he'd felt something click into place. An old identity sharpened into new purpose. Fixing boilers wouldn't fix Jake, but it might shore up the loose scaffolding in Jack's own heart. He arrived home to a voicemail from Emily Cruz. Jake's progress is strong. Family story night is optional, but I recommend you attend. He asked if you'd bring the catcher's mitt again. Jack played the message twice, letting the words scuff grooves of doubt. That night, he climbed into the attic and rummaged through boxes until he found his father's World War II footlocker. Inside, among yellowed ration cards and brittle photographs, lay a pocket diary. Pages smelled of mildew and ocean brine. Jack had never dared read it. His father carried secrets like shrapnel. But tonight, he opened to a random entry. 19, April 1945. Liberated a village. Met children who smiled at chocolate. War feels endless until a kid laughs. Jack's throat tightened. He copied the passage into his spiral notebook under a fresh story title. When Your Grandfather Tasted Hope. He imagined Jake reading it in the rehab dorm, perhaps feeling less alone in inherited silence. The idea seeded a warmth he hadn't felt since Susan's last lucid day, when she'd squeezed his hand and whispered, "Leave the door cracked for him." He realized he finally had. Family story night at Cayuga Creek happened in the old convent dining hall, its high ceiling strung with paper lanterns that pulsed like slow heartbeats. Residents sat in concentric arcs, some fiddling with rubber worry bands, others gripping journals swollen with unsent letters. At the front, a microphone stood on a thrift store rug, an altar for messy truths. Jack arrived early, catcher's mitt dangling from his belt loop. He shook hands with Rosa the nurse, who whispered that Jake had been rehearsing something all week. The room filled with the current of collective nerves. Parents smoothing skirts, siblings tracing phone screens, a grandmother quietly praying a rosary. A counselor opened with a reminder. Stories were gifts. Receivers must honor them with listening, not fixing. Jack felt the words land in his gut. He'd spent a lifetime fixing. Could he simply listen? The Hamilton watch under his cuff ticked like a metronome, counting down to his turn at restraint. Residents shared one by one. A former EMT described stealing fentanyl from ambulances. The crowd did not flinch. A shy college girl read a poem about loving her veins again. Applause rose, gentle but sure. Then Counselor Debbie called, "Jake Lawson?" Jake walked up, posture uncertain but forward. He unfolded a page, glanced at the audience, eyes snagging on his father's. Jack inclined his head, silent, mitt across his knees. Jake's voice started thin. "I used to measure love by how much pain I could hide from the people who gave it to me. Turns out pain grows interest." Laughter rippled, surprised. He recounted nights in the basement when the furnace's hum felt like a lullaby and a threat, how he blamed his father's quiet because it echoed his own. He described the watch, a tiny sun that kept rising even in darkness, and how pawning it felt like unplugging his lineage from the wall. Mid-speech, words faltered. He swallowed, eyes glassy. I thought silence would protect him from seeing me fail. Instead, it built a wall high enough that I couldn't see him either. Pause. I'm ready to learn how to talk. He turned to Jack. And to listen. Jack's chest thrummed. Applause swelled, soft as pulse under skin. When the room quieted, Debbie invited family responses. Jack stood, boots creaking on rug. The microphone felt heavier than torque wrenches he'd hefted for decades. He inhaled greenhouse-peppered air. Son, he began, voice gravel but steady. I used to think fixing things was love. But a furnace ain't a heart. Hearts aren't pipes. They're doors. He tapped the mitt. I've kept this since you were 8. I didn't play catch again after Mom got sick. His breath hitched. When you come home, we'll throw till the sun goes down. A collective exhale washed the hall. Jake's shoulders dropped, a visible release. No grand hug, no Hollywood swell, just 2 men nodding in the same rhythm, recognizing the ground between them was no longer booby-trapped. After the session, Jake handed his father a peat pot with a single basil seedling from the greenhouse. Water daily, he said, grin tentative. Jack accepted, soil crumbling onto his calloused palm. Outside, the night carried spring warmth. Jack placed the seedling in the cup holder, started the truck, and drove south. At each red light, he glanced at the basil, leaves trembling with the engine's idle. Fragile, aromatic, alive. He parked at home, set the pot on the kitchen windowsill beside Susan's ceramic robin figurine, and whispered, "Light's coming in, Sue." The house, once an echo chamber of loss, felt halfway to breathing again. Upstairs, Jack opened the notebook, added a new story title, When Your Seedling Learned the Word Tomorrow. He set an alarm for 5:10 as always, but this time, sleep found him before regret could. In the dark, the Hamilton watch ticked less like a countdown and more like a lullaby, sinking 2 restless hearts miles apart under the same fractured moon. Jake Lawson marked days by the scent of the greenhouse. Basil sweet on Monday, pepper seedlings by Wednesday, and by Friday, the sharp tang of tomato vines pruned back to their green cores. 6 weeks had slipped through Cayuga Creek's rigid timetable, each sunrise an exercise in staying. Now everything hinged on a single permission slip, a 48-hour home pass scheduled for the weekend preceding his court review. If he stayed clean, returned on time, and spoke truth in Judge Hammond's courtroom, he would keep his place in the program. If not, orange jumpsuit again. On Monday morning, Counselor Debbie pinned an itinerary to the cork board. Saturday, 8 o'clock. Lawson, Jake, home pass pickup, parent. Sunday, 2000, Lawson return. Those 2 lines glowed like neon. Jake felt equal parts relief and nausea. He wanted to breathe air that hadn't been pre-approved by a nurse, to hear neighborhood dogs barking low-budget symphonies at dusk. But the outside world was also where pills lurked in coat pockets, where shame hid behind convenience store alleys. In one-on-one session, Rosa asked, "What scares you most about going home?" Jake fiddled with the elastic ID band on his wrist. That the quiet will scream again. That I'll see Mom's mug on the shelf and remember every moment I wasted. Rosa tilted her head. Grief doesn't go away because we medicate it, Jake. It just waits. She slid a worksheet across. Coping plan for triggers. Column A listed likely landmines. Column B demanded practical responses. Under Memories of Mother, Jake wrote, "Talk to Dad, not to silence." He tapped the pencil on that line until the wood dented. 50 miles south, Jack Lawson checked the same date on a grease-smudged calendar above his workbench. Nights he volunteered at Hopeline until 2 a.m., then reported to Syracuse Motors by 6. The double duty etched fatigue into the lines around his eyes, yet he wouldn't cut either shift. The plant paid bills, the hotline paid a debt to empathy. When he told Jake about the volunteer gig during Sunday visits, the young man's eyebrows rose, not with mockery, but something like cautious admiration that warmed Jack more than the weak chapel coffee. Tuesday evening, Jack's supervisor offered overtime. He declined. Instead, He drove to the thrift store for fresh sheets and a second-hand desk lamp. The basement futon was gone, dragged curbside weeks ago, replaced by a twin bed he assembled with slow reverence, as if faith resided in Allen head bolts. He vacuumed drywall dust, opened the small basement window for the first time in years, and let April air swirl through spiderwebs. Atop the nightstand, he placed Susan's robin figurine and the basil seedling Jake had given him, its leaves now glossy from weekly waterings and soft conversation. By Wednesday, anxiety crackled between father and son like static on an AM radio drifting out of tune. Jake phoned after evening meditation. "Dad, what if I mess up? What if you regret letting me home?" Jack laid a forearm across his kitchen table, feeling the grain under his calluses. The Hamilton watch clicked calm punctuation. "I don't expect perfect, Jake. I expect present. 48 hours. We'll breathe through them." "I don't even remember what normal smells like," Jake muttered. Jack pictured the sawdust scent of the attic, the petrol tang of the pickup, Susan's apple cinnamon candle lingering in the living room. "We'll find new normal," he said. After the call, he stared at the mitt on the coffee table and wondered if the leather would feel foreign to Jake's fingers or familiar like forgiveness. Thursday brought courtroom prep with Emily Cruz. She drilled Jake on likely questions: employment plans, relapse prevention, restitution. He stumbled over the job answer. "I don't know. I dropped out." "What else can your hands do?" She pushed. He remembered fixing Susan's garden fence, the satisfaction of wood meeting nail, but words stuck. "I'll think of something." Cruz sighed. "Judge Hammond loves concrete." Think by Saturday, Jake left her office feeling small. Yet, later that night in the dorm, he sketched ideas on scrap paper. Greenhouse assistant, carpentry apprentice, volunteer groundskeeper. The possibilities frightened him less than the blankness had. Friday afternoon, Jack clocked out early, ignoring ribbing from coworkers who'd nicknamed him Iron Man for his marathon schedule. He drove to the county courthouse to file proof of full restitution, the Hamilton watch appraisal, and notarized affidavit that it had been returned. The clerk's stamp thudded heavy as a heartbeat. Errand done, he parked by Onondaga Lake and practiced listening to the hush. Clouds moved across the water's dull mirror, reminding him of Susan's quiet days near the end, an outward calm packed with interior storms. He breathed until the scene felt less like dredging memory and more like standing guard where love had once stood alone. Hopeline's call center occupied a strip mall office above a shuttered tanning salon, its only sign a faded sticker. "You are not alone. Dial 988. On Friday nights, most volunteers were college psych majors earning credits. Jack, decades older, felt like a veteran dropped into rookie rotation. The room buzzed with low voices, clicking keyboards, the soft clink of tea mugs. At 11:43 p.m., his headset chirped. "Line 3, female, late teens to early 20s. This is Hopeline. I'm Jack," he said, voice steady though his stomach knotted after every silent ring. Breath on the line, then a strained whisper. "I screwed everything again." Jack adjusted the headset. "It's okay. Tell me what happened." She rambled in fragments. Failed classes, an eviction notice, 3 days since last pill but cravings, like knives under the skin. Her name was Lydia. She sat alone behind a convenience store, cold on milk crate plastic. Trucks whooshed in the distance. He pictured sodium streetlights, wrappers tumbling like modern tumbleweeds. "Sounds like you've fought hard for 3 days, Jack said. A wet laugh. "Hard? I almost bought from a guy outside the shelter, but I'm broke. Only reason I didn't cave. Sometimes empty pockets keep us alive," he replied, surprising himself with the wry tone. He swallowed. "I'm not here to fix you, Lydia. But I'll stay while we figure what next looks like." She sniffled. "Next? Nobody wants me." Jack stared at the basil under fluorescent glare. "Someone waited for me," he murmured. "I took longer than 3 days to come home." Lydia's breathing slowed. "Is that true?" "Yeah, I'm a dad. My son's in rehab. Tomorrow, he gets a short pass home." He hadn't meant to share, but the words spilled gentle. I was scared he'd never choose life again. But every sunrise is a vote. Silence blended with traffic. Then, could you help me vote? Jack's chest ached. We can call a detox line together. I'll stay while they arrange a bed. He typed instructions into the system. Looped three-way call. 15 minutes stretched tender and tense. When the intake coordinator confirmed placement at a women's shelter clinic, Lydia sobbed. Thank you, mister. Just Jack, he said. And hey, 48 hours at a time, okay? The call ended. Jack removed the headset, palms moist. A student volunteer blinked at him. Dude, you good? He nodded. But inside, currents shifted. Compassion was not weakness. It was torque. If he could hold a stranger through crisis, he could hold his own son while letting him kneel on his own shaky legs. He left the center at 2:15 a.m., moonlight casting long stripes across the empty lot. The pickup's engine turned over with a comforting rumble. At a red light, he opened Susan's pocket diary, flipped to a random page. It read simply, Night shift saved us again. He smiled, tears stinging, and drove home to ready the basement bed. Back at Cayuga Creek, Jake lay awake, sensing tomorrow like thunder beyond hills. He reread his coping worksheet, then opened the spiral notebook. Tonight's story from Dad described a factory strike where Jack had stood between angry workers and management, holding a busted gear like undeniable evidence. Sometimes, the story ended, the machine shows you which part is broken. You still gotta stop the line to fix it. Jake traced the sentence with a fingertip until words blurred into sleep. Saturday morning brought sun crisp as bitten apple skin. Jack parked in the rehab lot, heart drumming a cadence older than parenthood. Protect, but don't smother. Jake emerged with a counselor's clipboard blessing and a paper bag of medications. His jeans hung better, eyes clearer. They exchanged an awkward half-hug that settled into mutual reassurance rather than apology. First stop. Susan's grave. The cemetery grass shimmered with dew. Jake kneeled, brushing soil crumbs from the headstone lettering. Hi, Mom, he whispered, voice cracking. Jack stepped back, giving privacy, counting robins on a nearby maple branch. When Jake returned, his cheeks were wet, but he walked straighter, as if grief, acknowledged, weighed less. At home, the basement smelled of fresh paint and lemon cleaner. Jake touched the basil leaves, smiled. They spent afternoon assembling a flat-pack desk. Jack handed screws. Jake used the drill. The rhythm felt almost casual until the drill bit stripped ahead, and Jake cursed softly, frustration flashing. Jack inhaled, remembering group advice. Instead of grabbing the tool, he asked, Want help backing it out or prefer a new screw? Jake exhaled. New screw. They continued without further sparks. Evening fell. Over stovetop chili, they spoke of job ideas. Jack mentioned Syracuse Motors apprenticeships. Jake admitted fascination with the rehab greenhouse. Maybe horticulture therapy, he mused. Jack nodded, hiding surprise. After dishes, they pulled out the catcher's mitts. The backyard grass felt spongy from spring rains. Under porch light, they tossed a ball. The first few lobs were tentative. Then, muscles remembered. Each smack of leather sounded like punctuation on sentences they hadn't yet formed. Sunday afternoon arrived too fast. Drive back to Cayuga Creek was silent, but not heavy. Counselor Debbie checked Jake in at 1955. She sniffed the air, mock suspicious. Smell like chili and confidence. Jake laughed, surprised by the sound. He hugged his father. A real hug this time, heartbeat to heartbeat. Thanks for not bubble wrapping me, Dad. Thanks for not shutting the door, Jack replied. Monday's courtroom pews creaked under anxious families. Emily Cruz, crisp navy suit, reviewed docs one last time. Jake wore borrowed slacks and a pale blue shirt. Jack sat behind, palms pressed together. Hamilton watch ticking under his cuff like a supportive metronome. Judge Hammond entered, robe sweeping. Proceedings unfolded. Rehab progress letters, negative drug screens, Jack's restitution proof. A DA challenged readiness. Defendant had only brief home pass, hardly real-world stress. Cruz countered with Hopeline volunteer testimony about Jack's stability and Jake's proactive job pursuit. Jake had emailed the county horticulture coordinator about internships. Hammond leaned forward. "Mr. Lawson, your thoughts?" Jake rose. Room spun, but he steadied. "Your Honor, I'm not cured. I'm scared of both relapse and success. But I learned fear's a map. I have guides now." He glanced at Cruz, then his father. "I'll keep asking directions." Hammond tapped pen, studying the boy. At length. Conditional diversion continued. Additional check-ins weekly. Employment plan required within 60 days, gavel rapped. Relief rippled like quiet thunder. Outside courthouse steps, sunlight sliced through clouds. Cruz shook Jake's hand, whispering, "Keep drawing that map." She winked at Jack. "Nice work, sir." She departed, heels clicking decisive staccato. Jack and Jake descended to the sidewalk. Traffic hissed. Pigeons flapped. Jake opened his glove box to stow documents and found the old baseball, scuffed from last night's catches. He rolled it in his palm. "Got 20 minutes before the center's curfew. Want to stop somewhere?" They drove to an abandoned Little League field on the edge of town. Grass reached their shins, bases long stolen by weeds, but the backstop still stood, a rusted skeleton against peach dusk. They paced off distance, no words needed. Jack lobbed first. The ball arced, thudded into Jake's mitt. Jake grinned, wound up, threw back, the seam whizzing through gold-lit air. Each catch an amen, each throw a let-go. The world around them receded until only leather, breath, and horizon remained. Dark settled, mosquitoes sang, and they finally stopped, palms tingling. Jack pocketed the ball. "We'll need lights next time," he said. Jake chuckled. "Next time." They walked to the truck side by side. The roadway home shimmered under street lamps. In the pickup's cab, basil scent mingled with old leather. Jack flicked on the radio, static, then soft jazz. For once, static felt welcome. Background noise that proved the air between them could carry signals after all. Back at Cayuga Creek gates, Jake lingered by the passenger door. 48 hours, he said, and nobody broke. Jack smiled. 49 if you count the extra catches. Jake offered a fist. Jack bumped it gently. "Love you, Dad." "Love you more, kid." He watched Jake walk through the gate, tall, tentative, but forward. Then Jack drove into the spill of night, heart humming with the quiet percussion of a watch, ticking in tune with possibility. The road ahead curved into darkness, but his headlights stretched just far enough to keep going. The email landed in Jack Lawson's inbox on a drizzly Monday at 10:04 a.m. Subject line: Syracuse Motors Workforce Restructuring Announcement. He read it once, twice, then a third time, while the hydraulic press behind him slammed steel into door, panels with oblivious rhythm. Effective June 30th, the second shift would be eliminated. Senior welders would be offered buyouts or reassigned to part-time maintenance. No benefits guaranteed. Jack's first thought was not the mortgage, nor the copay for his lingering carpal tunnel appointments. It was Jake's transition date, circled on a wall calendar back home. July 3rd. Move from Cayuga Creek's inpatient wing to a halfway house on Maple Street. Rent due weekly, drug tests random. Jake had been practicing the bus route, calculating grocery costs, building a resume that listed greenhouse apprentice on one proud line. Without Jack's paycheck cushioning the unknown, the route looked less like a path and more like a tightrope strung over oncoming traffic. He closed the email, wiped grit from his glasses, and finished the shift, bolts torqued to spec, because muscle memory refused crisis. At 3:30, the plant horn wailed, a sound that once signaled clocks punching freedom, now echoing like a last post. Men and women filed out with shoulders a fraction lower than they'd been at dawn, clutching lunches uneaten, jokes unsaid. In the lot, Jack unlocked his pickup and sat with the door open, drizzle brushing the brim of his cap. He imagined telling Jake about the layoffs. The young man's brow furrowed, the reflex to shoulder the blame. Not yet, Jack decided, turning the key. Cayuga Creek's campus exhaled lilac and wet pine as he parked for Tuesday family night. Graduation banners already fluttered along the walkway. Courage grows here. Class of Spring 2025. Inside the chapel-turned-visitation room, folding chairs formed a circle around a lone music stand where residents rehearsed speeches. Jake entered moments later, hair trimmed, green polo instead of gray sweats, a sprout of confidence pushing through soil of nerves. They embraced with one of those half-second hesitations, neither mentioned anymore. "I got news," Jake said, easing into a chair. "Center offered me part-time in the greenhouses, stipend plus a room discount. If I keep clean 3 months, they bump me to full-time peer mentor." Jack's throat tightened with pride and newly sharpened fear. "My job may evaporate before your first paycheck." He forced a smile. "That's solid footing, son." Jake grinned, then studied Jack's face. "You okay? You look weather-beaten." "Plant sent a letter," Jack admitted, voice scraping. "Shift cuts." "Nothing certain yet." Jake's grin faltered but didn't fall. He took a breath. Rosa's breathing exercises had taught him to let silence cool panic. "We'll figure stuff," he said. "One sober day at a time, right?" Jack nodded, awed by the phrase from his son's mouth. The counselor dismissed them for recreation hour. Father and son wandered to the old basketball court, puddles reflecting ragged clouds. Jack passed a ball. Jake dribbled, laughing when a splash soaked his sneakers. There, in wet echoes, Jack saw a version of the future, uncertain, imperfect, yet playable. On the drive home, dusk smeared mauve across the sky. Jack's phone pinged with a Hope Line alert. Volunteer orientation for Crisis Line peer mentors scheduled next month. He read the tagline, "Turn your listening into livelihood," and wondered whose life might pivot if he dared trade steel presses for ringing phones. The possibility glowed faintly, like the porch light Susan never let burn out even when they left town. Before bed, he opened Jake's spiral notebook and added a new story. "When factory whistles sound like questions." He described the email, the drizzle, the moment he realized a father could lose bearings right when his child gained them. The last line, "Being lost together is different than being lost alone." He set the notebook in the outgoing mail pile, sealed with tape so Jake couldn't claim the pages had blown open by accident. Wednesday warmed into muggy twilight, thunderheads bruising the horizon. Jack clocked out early, skipping overtime that might soon be ghost pay, and drove to the abandoned Little League field where he'd volunteered as night watchman. The city planned to demolish the grandstands in summer. Until then, small stipend paid him to keep out vandals and salvage recyclables. He unlocked the rusty gate, inhaling grass smell thick as memory. Mosquitoes vibrated in the hush. On bleacher step 3, he stationed an old lawn chair, hotline flip phone on his lap, mitt at his feet. Rain began as a whisper. At 9:17 p.m., the phone buzzed. Hopeline watch shift, Jack speaking. The voice was slurred but familiar. Lydia, the girl from the convenience store call. She'd lasted 2 weeks at shelter, relapsed yesterday. Now she sat in a bus depot bathroom, arm burning from a failed attempt to find a vein. "Everything stinks of bleach and piss. I'm trash," she wept. Jack's pulse raced, but training steadied him. "Lydia, thanks for calling. How about we breathe together?" He counted with her, 4 in, 6 out, until words untangled. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, feared hospital staff would call police. Jack recalled Cayuga Creek's medical detox wing took uninsured drop-ins. He dialed Rosa on a separate line, arranged intake. While holding both calls, lightning forked beyond left field, illuminating weed-choked bases. "Can you walk to the main doors?" he asked Lydia. "My legs shake," she whispered. "I'll stay on as long as the phone battery holds." He pictured Jake's first steps, chubby legs wobbly toward Susan cheering. "Every step is a vote," he said, the mantra borrowed from his earlier midnight. Lydia sobbed, but moved. He heard door hinges, nurse voices. Confirmation came. Intake accepted. When Jack finally hung up, rain hammered tin roof. He leaned back, water speckling his face, sudden tears merging with storm. The phone buzzed again. Not Crisis Line, but Jake on borrowed center cell. "Dad, counselor said you missed evening call?" Jack wiped rain. "Had a situation." "I'm fine. You safe?" "Yeah." Jake's voice carried dorm room hush. "I found the notebook." Thanks for writing the scary parts. Jack smiled at the dark. Scary means alive, he said. Jake hesitated. Tomorrow's rehearsal for graduation. Will you share something? Me? Speech? Maybe that Firefly story. People should know. Jack's chest fluttered. We'll see. They exchanged goodnights. After the call, Jack sat listening to Rain's percussion on aluminum. In that steady drumming, he imagined worlds where he counseled from a field, fixed hearts instead of machines. The idea no longer felt like treason to his father's creed. It felt like evolution. Morning brought humid calm, as though night never raged. At the plant, rumor thickened. Layoffs confirmed. HR offered retraining vouchers. The buyout check equaled 4 months' pay. Jack signed, palms oddly steady. At lunchtime, he phoned Nora from the support group. Think Hopeline hires trainers? She laughed, a bright chime in the factory gloom, and promised to connect him with a director. Driving home with a manila envelope of severance papers, Jack felt jobless, but not undone. He glanced at the basil on the dash, leaves larger, greener. Rainwater still dotted the windshield. Sunlight refracted through droplets, making brief mobile rainbows, reminders that storms, too, carried color. Saturday dawned sticky. Jack donned pressed khakis, slipped the Hamilton watch onto his wrist, and pocketed the catcher's mitt. At Cayuga Creek, rows of folding chairs dotted the lawn beneath a white canopy. A makeshift stage bore a banner. Every day a first step. Parents fanned themselves with programs. Staff in pastel shirts arranged mason jars of wildflowers. Jake, in a charcoal dress shirt, stood with the graduate group. 9 residents, each clutching a 7-day sobriety chip upgraded to completion beans dried from the greenhouse. Rosa clipped a sunflower boutonniere to his collar. When she stepped back, Jake sought his father's gaze, found it, and breathed. Ceremony began with a counselor reading a Mary Oliver poem about wild geese, lines on brokenness and belonging. Graduates approached Mike one by one. A former Marine spoke of bottle-shaped foxholes. A grandmother made the crowd laugh, describing her wine-o'clock alarm. Jake was last. Emily Cruz, present as pro bono cheer squad, squeezed his shoulder before he stepped up. Jake unfolded a sheet. Wind fluttered edges. He steadied with a gardener's patience. Hi, I'm Jake, addict in recovery. Murmurs of "Hi, Jake" rose. He continued. My story starts with silence. I thought quiet kept the bad out. Turns out it grows mold laughter, soft. He told of borrowing darkness from pills, pawning heritage for seconds of peace. Then he pointed at Jack. That man taught me quiet can also be space big enough for 2 people to hear each other breathe. He drew the catcher's mitt from behind podium. When I threw this in our yard last month, I felt time reverse and move forward at once. That's recovery. Past and future shaking hands, promises playing catch. He placed the mitt on the podium, a relic offered to the present, then stepped back, eyes glistening. Applause rippled, some parents wiping tears. Jack's throat ached with proud pain. Debbie announced completion certificates. Jake accepted his, shaking hands, sunflower bobbing. After photos, Jack and Jake slipped away to the pickup. Jack handed Jake the manila envelope. Plant job's gone. Buyout, retraining voucher. I want to train as crisis line supervisor. Jake blinked. You'd leave wrenches? I'd still fix things. Just different leaks, he inhaled. Half-time pay first year. Might be ramen again for a bit. Jake chuckled softly. I make a mean greenhouse salad. Then he added serious. I can cover some rent once I'm full-time. They drove to the decommissioned plant. Workers already rolled tool chests toward trailers. Jack retrieved his old toolbox, ran a palm over dented lid. Yours, he said, holding it out. Jake opened the box. Screwdrivers, socket set, bright underlayers of oil. I can't, Dad. You will. Jack closed his son's fingers around the handle. Fix fences, flower beds, whatever needs hands. Evening amber pooled over the vacant parking lot. They unloaded the toolbox at Maple Street Halfway House, tiny rooms smelling of detergent and hope. Basil Seedling found a place on the sill. Before leaving, Jack and Jake stood awkward in the doorway until Jake burst into a grin. "See you at first paycheck?" Jack laughed. "See you at next catch." He drove toward dusk, windows down. At a red light, he studied the Hamilton watch. 7:03 p.m. Same hour he once dialed 911 and cracked everything open. Ticking sounded lighter now, like a train crossing new tracks. He stopped at the old field, unlocked the gate though no shift required. Fireflies hovered above uncut grass. He sat on the bleachers, watching light pulse. In his pocket, Susan's diary quote awaited. "War ends. Rebuilding starts even in rubble," Jack exhaled and whispered, "We're rebuilding, Sue." In the halfway house room, Jake wrote job goals on the whiteboard. He glanced at the mitt on his bed, at basil leaves reflecting a street lamp glow. Then, at a schedule card. Sunday, community garden orientation. He smiled, closing the notebook his father had filled with stories. Tucking it under the pillow, he lay back and listened. Outside, city noises rose, distant siren, laughter, wind riffling leaves. None of it felt like threat. It sounded like life continuing. He turned off the lamp. Miles apart, father and son lay in different rooms but under the same night sky peppered with new constellations. Basil sprigs, sunflower boutonnieres, a gold Hamilton star ticking steady. Tomorrow promised no guarantees, but offered innings, phone lines, seedlings, tangible tasks for stubborn hands. And that, at last, was enough.